with both faith leaders and voting experts who will help us navigate this troubling time we are in when it comes to staying safe and making our voices heard through our vote. With COVID-19 pandemic and both states and the current administration voter suppression tactics, we must be more intentional than ever with our plan to vote. Today is National Request Your Ballot Day. Have you requested your ballot yet? As faith leaders in our communities, we have the responsibilities to both plan ourselves and urge our communities to make a concrete voter plan right now. We cannot wait or be passive in this election. There is too much at stake. Right now, being a faithful voter means that we are asking each other if we have checked our voter registration status, if we have a plan and how we will vote, if we have called Congress to urge them to fund election protections so every vote will be counted, and finally, if we have encouraged our communities to do the same. Today, we will talk through each of these steps. As we think about the next couple of weeks, you may feel fearful, uncertain, or even anxious. I know I do, and even some of the voters that I've spoken with here in Florida every day, they are feeling just as anxious. These emotions are valid, but today we can take a step together in faith and hope to hear from experts who will give us critical information that we must pass on to our communities. Just a little housekeeping notes real quick. We are recording this webinar and we'll send this out with all of the slides and mention resources to everyone who has registered for this webinar. And please take advantage of the chat box and the Q&A function throughout the webinar. We will be sure to either address your questions in that moment or during the Q&A portion. And thank you again for being here. Our first speaker, I am honored to introduce Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, the co-founder and the CEO of the Skinner Leadership Institute, who has extensive experience working with faith leaders across the country around voting, census, and strengthening our democracy to be a true democracy where every person's dignity is seen and respected. Dr. Skinner, welcome.
Thank you so much for making me a part of such an important panel. Friends, the recent death of civil rights icon John Lewis and C.T. Vivian reminds us that no matter how dark the way or difficult the path to justice for Americans of color, people who are poor, people who are left on the side of the road, our faith reminds us that it is our responsibility to make sure that those on the outside get on the inside, that they're part of the American plan. So whether the battle is voter suppression in the coming election, the disproportionate COVID deaths of Black and brown people, unjustified police killings of unarmed Black people, or the undercount of the census, we are reminded as people of faith today of the inherent value of all humans despite the injustices of our time. We are each so precious to God that God took the time to count every one of us. So being counted in the census means not only do we matter to God, but we have got to matter to one another. There's no expendable human person in the sight of God, nor in our sight. So on the surface, the census, if we take that first, seems to be very fair. Everybody has a chance to be counted. The census was mailed to everyone. Everyone, if they didn't get counted in the census by mail, they could call in or they could go online. What's unfair about that? Yet long-standing social inequities, the politicization and fear mongering on immigration and the inherent distrust of a lot of unserved people on government means that there will be undercounted people. There'll be more uncounted people unless you and I act. Even these closing days, as they say in sports, it's not over until it is over. And we have time to do good. We still have time to do what is right. Added to that, the pandemic has put the faith community on its back, in that we've had to do virtually what we used to do so easily, person to person. In fact, that's the beauty and the power of the faith community, is that we are a high touch community that was taken from us by this COVID. But Mother Teresa reminded us a long time ago, God does not call us to be successful. God calls us to be faithful. Being faithful in times like these is remembering that we serve a mighty, matchless, and miracle working God. It means that in this final period before the census, that simple acts like just getting our neighbors, our person down the street, the person we meet, the person in our faith community, our Facebook page people who just are on our network, to say, hey, you could still be counted. Let people know that 2020census.gov is still open for them to be counted in 10 minutes for what will last for 10 whole years. That means for 10 whole years, no matter how much disaster aid California needs right now in the fire, California is going to get the amount of disaster aid that they were counted in the 2010 census. Being faithful means being inspired by the example of the biblical Joseph and Nehemiah and the prophets who stood in the gap against unjust rulers, with leaders now attempting to confuse not only the voting, but confuse the census, set the date back, and make it even more difficult for those who struggle. That means we have to stand in the gap even more. It is like becoming a collective group of superheroes, like the gifted Chadwick Boseman, who took all that he had in the short life that he had and gave that in a way that has uplifted so many of us. It's using whatever we have at our disposal. We're told recently that the COVID has actually set back the census in ways that we never imagined when we first started in this coalition. We had great plans, as all of you know, to get out and to mobilize and to do outdoor events. New enumerators now are having great difficulty. If it was easy, we wouldn't need our faith. And so faith means taking what you've got and adding it to what God alone can bring and doing what is impossible. And that's what we're facing right now. It is doing the creative right now. We in the National African American Clergy Network have taken the same routes most of you have had to take a group of lemons and make lemonade out of it. What does that mean? It means that we've used our worship services through Facebook Live and through Zoom, and have asked everyone who knew someone who was in the hard to count, Black men 18 to 35, anyone who knew immigrants, anyone who was connected to the homeless, anyone connected to students, anyone connected to people of color, to say, if those are in your network, we're going to use part of this worship service to just stop and text somebody. We've done that in many of our church services. We've posted online. We have used our connection to athletes and others who are, we would call superstars. Many of us are sports fans, and we knew people to do, help us with our videos and the like. And through a grant from Verizon, we were able to get iPads and hotspots to rural counties in Ohio and North Carolina and other places. It meant taking whatever we had to do what we couldn't do on our own, but collectively. Through this faith table, we have found best practices from one another. We've taken notes from one another on what is working in different communities. What we do know right now is that we are facing multiple pandemics, healthcare, police, all levels of inequality. But that's when God kicks in. That's why we're on this call today to say, don't quit. We've got 3 weeks more to go. We've got 3 weeks more of energy to reach those who haven't been reached. The state of our democracy depends on us getting everyone counted. And we who in this battle know it's about money and power. It's about representation. And for every sector of the community that has the need for those services, those are exactly the same people who will be undercounted unless we put all that we have and leave it out on the floor, as they say in basketball. We've got to leave it out on the floor. If there was ever a time we needed to lean into one another, and that's why I love being part of this coalition, and encourage one another not to give up, not to slack off, not to say it's over. It's not over literally until it is over. The Apostle Paul reminds us that we're not in a sprint, we're in a long distance race. And he reminded us to run with perseverance, the race that is set before us. So what can we do in this short time? We can gather over the next 3 weeks in virtual spaces like this just to encourage one another and learn from one another. We can escalate our social media posts right now to those parts of the hard to reach communities that are on social media. And as I said, we're reaching out right now to the John Legends of the world and others to get them to do PSAs so that people who you and I may not be able to reach, may be reached by entertainers or athletes. But friends, just as the 2020 census is so big in its impact, so is the election. Everyone says this so often, it sounds like a cliche, but it is not. This election will determine the kind of America we will be. Will we be an America that keeps mired in systemic racism, rooted in white supremacy, where people of color will never get a shot? Or will we move to a true we the people, where everyone, literally of every race, background, and faith counts? Voting is really an act of faith because it affirms the Imago Dei, the image of God in every person. Voting is an act of faith because it says my neighbor counts as much as I do, so I'm going to go the distance to make sure my neighbor gets counted. And voting is an act of faith because ultimately it determines our vision for a nation where every voice is heard, every life is valued, and everyone has a shot for the quality of life that is worthy of every one of God's children. Your vote matters. Your count matters. You matter to God. You matter to us. So we just need to get busy these next 3 weeks and know that God is watching and God will empower us as we move. But faith is moving on what you don't have until you get it. We don't have the count that we need right now, but we're going after it because by faith we will get it. God bless you and thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Skinner. Very powerful message there. Just as she said, you know, we need to stand up and be counted, whether it's through the census and as well as through our vote. If you have not been counted, if you don't know anybody who's been counted for this census, we encourage you. We have dropped the, we're going to drop the address for the website into the chat. Please go and get counted and stand up to be counted for the census. And that goes right along with what we're talking about with our vote. We need to stand up and be counted for our vote as well. And I am excited, I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker, which is Israq Ali, who is the organizing director for Empower Change. Empower Change is the largest Muslim-led social and racial justice organization in the United States and leads the hashtag MyMuslimVote campaign, which aims to register and organize Muslim communities across the country to vote. Israq will walk us through the first step of making our plan and then registering to vote and checking our voter status. Israq, thanks for coming, and please take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Adwan. And Dr. Skinner, thank you so much for that opening and just that perspective that, you know, what really sticks across faith communities, across folks right now is that, you know, as a community, the work that we're doing, either like, you know, checking in on each other about the census because of its implications, or voting as an act of our faith is so key, and it resonates with us and the work that we're doing as well. So I don't know if my slides are up or not. Okay, cool. So if it's loading, okay, just give me a thumbs up if it is, because I can actually see it. Oh, there we go. Great. Well, there we go. So Assalamu alaikum, greetings of peace to everyone. As Adwan had just mentioned, my name is Ishraq. I'm with Empower Change. And, you know, I'll be talking a bit about, you know, the first step of like, you know, registering to vote and making sure that we're kind of building a foundation to make sure that we're maximizing our impact in November. But I'll talk a bit about it through the lens of our like signature campaign, which is MyMuslimVote. So this campaign is a campaign that we dreamed up several years ago when Empower Change first was formed together. And our idea was really, how are we engaging and mobilizing our community and ensuring that we're turning out to vote, that we're coming together as a community to express our values in the public sphere, and seeing this as an aspect of our faith. So let's see if I can hop into the next slide here. So simply put, MyMuslimVote is meant to be a resource for all folks in the community. If you need to check your voter registration, go to MyMuslimVote. If you need to register to vote, go to MyMuslimVote. If you need to request a vote by mail ballot, and I believe my colleagues will be sharing a bit more about that strategy, go to MyMuslimVote. You need to find your polling place, go to MyMuslimVote. Our idea is that we want to simplify and just streamline the act of voting in and of itself, that folks, there should be no barriers to it, because we know how voter suppression happens in communities of color, in immigrant communities, in states that don't have, you know, a large, like a diverse demographic. Our idea is that, you know, we're providing the tools there, and we want to make sure that it's shareable and it's accessible for folks so that they can share this link on their WhatsApp groups, on their text threads, on their emails, to their friends and families, to their faith community groups. I know I'm on several mosque WhatsApp groups. My mosque where I grew up in New York, to the Muslim community that I'm a part of in Los Angeles out over here. Our idea is that, you know, we just want to make it normal and easy that folks it's part of their muscle memory to check their voter registration status. We realize that it's really important that folks are checking in on one another via their family networks or their community networks. Part of it for us is that we believe it's prophetic for us to be connected as a community. That in this moment as a pandemic, where we're being asked to, you know, stay at home, to practice social distancing, how are we going to stay connected with one another? How are we going to form that sense of community? We're already doing that online. Why don't we add that additional layer of our tech tools and just making sure that folks are actually, you know, have the most important things prepared for them? So more than anything, a lot of folks may have registered to vote, and it differs state to state. If you were to go to mymuslimvote.org, our first thing that we really emphasize for folks is just check and make sure that your voter registration is up to date. You can do that really easily. And then if your voter registration isn't up to date, you can register, re-register at your current address, or if you've had a different name change. And then the other pieces, which will be, my colleagues again will be talking about, you know, requesting a vote by mail ballot if you're planning to, you know, submit your vote by mail ballot, or find your polling location. So again, these are just tools that we've made sure is a resource for folks in the community, that it's just reducing any barriers to the most simple and the most powerful act of just voting in and of itself. And then the next thing for us, we really want the website to speak to folks that want to take action. I'm imagining right now that the folks that are attending this webinar are folks that have checked their voter registration status, or they're planning to do so before the elections, and that they're planning to vote. But what about folks that, you know, want to do more because we're invested in our community, because we know it's prophetic to look out for the marginalized, for ourselves to address the issues that are marginalizing our communities. If you want to take a bit more action, we realize in this pandemic, our regular work about going door to door, or you know, canvassing and hosting like in-person town hall meetings or having listening sessions is going to change. So our idea, again, has been, if you want to be a part of mobilizing and doing work, you can do this easily online. And we've been really, reimagining how we are building online community, but also leveraging that online community space to be doing the needed get out the vote work. And so a big part of our MyMuslimVote campaign is supporting faith communities. If it's a group at a mosque, or a group of Muslim students at an Islamic school, or the Muslim Student Association at different colleges that want to make sure that their voices are heard and they're making an impact in the elections this year, we're providing them all the tools that they can do this work online, from virtual phone banking to virtual text banking, and simply just checking in on our Muslim community. And so part of that volunteering ethos is a big part of what MyMuslimVote is about. So once you've checked your registration, once you know that your information is all set, you've asked your friends and your family and your community members to also check their registration. The next step is, do you want to be involved in a movement that's going to help mobilize folks to scale across states? And that's what a bit of what our volunteer work looks like at MyMuslimVote. And so specifically what we've been up to, I know National Voter Registration Day is on September 22nd, but for our community, we've been hosting National Muslim Voter Registration Day on the last Friday of August, right before Labor Day. And the reason that we do that, there's a couple of reasons why that seems to be working with our community. One, Labor Day is usually one of the largest in-person Muslim conventions that happen by an organization called ISNA. So we know that Muslims are already planning across states, across denominations, planning to get together around Labor Day to celebrate faith values, to celebrate culture. We realize that, Friday being a holy day for us, it's our day of service. How do we capitalize on the fact that people are going to be getting together and that, they're transitioning away from the summer and into the fall around, their civic duty? So what we've done as the MyMuslimVote campaign in the past 3 years since we've started this is we've made it very easy and provided resources and support for mosques, for Islamic schools, for Muslim community centers, for Muslim volunteers to have all the visuals, posters, stickers, buttons to encourage their community members to go out to register to vote and make a vote plan. What we've also done is that we've been very intentional to reach out to Muslim imams and religious leaders so that on Friday, on our day of service, that they're delivering sermons around the importance of civic engagement and voting, and that there's an inherent prophetic act in exercising our political voice for issues that are impacting us, be it around immigration, equitable access to healthcare, education, and law enforcement reform. So we really are, from our end of it, we really want to be able to provide all the tools and the resources that you can set up faith leaders for success, for volunteers in different Muslim communities for success, and to really just reduce that barrier and any kind of hesitation folks may have around registering to vote, and this kind of feeling that one vote may not count, but it's us moving as a collective community and countering that narrative that it's when we vote as a community and we vote because of the issues and the values that we care about, is where we can make an impact. And so this year, because of the pandemic, we really had to, we couldn't do these in-person voter registration drives. What we ended up doing is hosting a virtual National Muslim Voter Registration Day. So we had about 15 to 20 volunteers for a couple of hours, making phone calls with us after we did an introduction and just really broke down what the kind of tools are. And we made it close to 3,000 calls in a couple of hours. Our idea really is, how are we making these things accessible to our community and that we can actually measure that impact? So then I'll I'm almost done here. One of the things that we're doing, and this again goes back to these prophetic principles, that we're incorporating some of the best practices in the field. And for us, vote tripling is a really key way to move folks and encourage people to reach out to their community members and their family members and their coworkers, so that every time you're having a conversation with someone, you're getting a pledge for them that they're committing to vote, but you're also asking them, can you think of 3 people in your community or people that you love that you also want to remind to vote? More often than not, and we've been running phone banks for the past couple of weeks, people are giving names of their siblings, of their parents, of their coworkers. So again, we're reinforcing the idea that voting is a communal act, and we're doing this in the frame of making an impact, maximizing your impact. And we'll be talking a bit more about vote by mail. We're also making that recommendation. So our idea is that we're making sure our volunteers are getting all the tools that they need and all the skills and support that they need to be able to engage and do get out the vote work. And then lastly, I keep saying this, and maybe a broken record, but I have a lot of memes and I have a lot of fun graphics, but we take our work very seriously. We know that it's going to be our entire community doing everything that's possible to get out the vote. And so from that end of it, we are hosting phone banks and text banks, all virtually across the internet, open to anybody that wants to make an impact and to join us to do this get out the vote work. So if you're curious, check out MyMuslimVote.org, and my email address is also here for folks to stay in touch and if folks have any questions. And on top of that, if folks do have other questions, please do drop them in the chat and we'll connect. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome stuff. Thank you very much, Israk, for that information. Just register, like he was saying, register, check your status, and then do the vote trickling, right? Which means make sure your community is doing the same. And then also, last but not least, but volunteer, right? Our faith calls us to speak out and do things, right? Our faith is action, and action is volunteering. So that is great. We thank you for that. Thank you for that presentation. We appreciate that very much. So we've heard lies from our president about safe and secure ways to vote, like voting by mail. But as faith leaders, we are called to speak truth to power and promote justice. We need to know the facts, and we need to share this information from experts with our communities. I've been talking with Florida voters the last couple of weeks, and they had no idea what their options were about voting by mail. They had no idea. They were totally clueless until I explained to them. You know, a lot of them was very fearful, and they didn't know if their vote would be counted. I took the time to explain to them and to give them their options about vote by mail. And by the end of our calls, we made about 3,000 calls. And by the end of our calls, most people were more comfortable with the understanding and the option of vote by mail. So it's really about educating our community, really getting out there and letting them know what their options are and doing in our vote by mail options. Our next speaker, I am eager to introduce Ms. Kayla Griffin. She is the Ohio Campaign State Director with All Votes is Local, and it's a grassroots mobilization effort coordinated by the Leadership Conference of Civil Rights and Human Rights. That's why I'm excited. And she is going to share with us the options for voting in this election and the myths and some of the myths about voting by mail. Thank you, Kayla.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here and joining you guys. I feel like I'm fired up after listening to our last two speakers. This is certainly an opportunity to dive in and just kind of bust some of those myths that we have, right, around vote by mail. But before I start with the myths, let me tell you a brief story, and I'm gonna set my timer to make sure I am staying on time and we're moving through this efficiently. I remember as a young girl going to the polls with my parents on election day and watching them stand in line and go in and cast their ballot. And when it came time for me to cast my ballot for the first time as a first-time voter, I was a sophomore in college. I was off to college, and I was like, how am I gonna cast my ballot? And I live in Ohio, and so Ohio had the vote by mail option, or absentee ballot as we call it as well. And my mother was like, you know, go ahead, apply, get your ballot, and cast your ballot. So in 2008, I was able to cast my ballot for the first time in the presidential election with a vote by mail ballot. That is something that always sticks out to me when I'm talking to people about absentee ballots and how it's unsafe, or this notion that, you know, it's not protected. And that is absolutely not true. We in Ohio and other states have been using absentee ballot or vote by mail ballots for years. And I want to make sure that I'm clear to say that absentee ballot and vote by mail, the terms are interchangeable. And so we have a gamut of ways to vote. And one of the things that we want to ensure, especially in this election, that we have free and fair elections for all, but that they are safe, that people do not have to choose between their safety and their health and their option and right to vote, right? And so that's what we want to focus on when we are having these conversations with people, whether they are parishioners or your neighbors or your family members, that we want everyone to have the option to vote how they choose to vote. And so here in Ohio, one of the things that is really beneficial for us is that we have a 28-day early voting period. So you all need to check in your states to see when early voting starts, if you have early voting, and to see if your ballots will come at the same time that early voting happens. What happens is you fill out your application, you get a ballot in the mail. When you get a ballot in the mail, there is a barcode that is assigned to you as a voter. Your barcode can be tracked throughout the whole process. And so you can sit at the comfort of your kitchen table and fill out your ballot. You can research, you can see who's on the ballot, and you can check off everything right there. Take it, sign it, put it in an envelope, sign it off. Now, here's the thing that we have had conversations around, and that is very important in this election. There are different ways to return your ballot. So you can take your ballot. If you are one of the states that have drop boxes, you can go and find where the nearest drop box is to you. You can drive down there and you can put it in the drop box. That's one option. The other option is, if you're a state that has prepaid postage, you can take your ballot and put it in a mailbox, and your postal service will come and pick up the your ballot and take it to the Board of Elections. The benefit of that is that if you live in a state like Ohio, where we have ballot tracking, you can see where your ballot is every step of the way. So from the time you request it to the time that it is processed, you can see where your ballot is. These are safe and secure measures to ensuring that your vote is cast and your voice is heard. Gone are the days where we have to stand in line to cast a ballot. Gone are the days, like, why we try to emphasize that vote by mail is such a secure process. And there are 5 states that use vote by mail exclusively, right? But we are still in the midst of a global pandemic. And we know that we cannot control this virus yet. There is not a vaccine yet. We don't know. There's still so much uncertainty around this virus. And so we really need to ensure that everyone feels safe and secure. I'm talking to church leaders now, and they're still like, we want to do souls to the polls. How do we do souls to the polls? And I'm like, you're not supposed to be transporting people. You're supposed to still have your mask on. One of the options for doing souls to the polls is ensuring that all of your congregants go ahead and apply for an absentee ballot. They fill out their ballot, and then you can go and pick them up one by one or as in a small group and take them and have them drop it off at the drop box. That can be an alternative to your souls to the polls, so that we're not, putting people in harm's way by standing in lines. And, I've heard the horror stories about places like Georgia where the lines are out of the door and around the corner. Even in Ohio, we've had, power outages, so people have to wait. These are really uncertain times. So we want to make sure that we're emphasizing. We have early voting month, right? You have, in Ohio, it's 28 days. You have to determine in your state, find out in your state how long you have for early voting. What does that look like? What is your plan? We have talked about this plan. Make a plan, make a plan, make a plan. Have alternatives to your plan. So one of the things that we're advocating for is expansion of drop boxes. Our Secretary of State in Ohio, he is going to ask for prepaid postage, because the other issue when we come to vote by mail is that if people don't have postage, they might not be able to get their ballots in on time. And so Understand what it is in your state and how things are operating. If you are an organization and you're able to facilitate the transportation of folks down to the BOEs, instead of having them stand in line, make sure that they can go and drop their ballot in the mail and ensure that the vote is being cast. We want to make sure that this is safe. The elections have to be free, they have to be fair, and in the time of COVID-19, they have to be safe. There is this notion that, as was stated earlier, that it is fraudulent and vote by mail is fraudulent. As I've said, vote by mail and absentee are often used interchangeably, right? And we have been doing this for decades. Folks have been voting by mail for decades. And oftentimes the elected officials who are touting this messaging that it is unsafe have also utilized vote by mail practices. The records show, right? It clearly indicates that they also are using vote by mail tactics. And so I want to just highlight once again, we have early voting months. You can sit at the comfort of your home, at your kitchen table, and make a plan. You can go over the ballots and not be rushed. You can sign there at your kitchen table and stuff your ballot. And then you can also track your ballot to ensure that everything is in order and safe. In Ohio, and I know in various other states that we partner with at All Voting is Local, they have administered plans, and they have published plans to tell you exactly how the ballot moves through the process. And so how it is being checked and double checked and triple checked. And they have bipartisan folks working the polls and working the processing. The other thing that I heard recently when I was out registering people to vote was that I want to ensure that my ballot is counted, and I need to, see my ballot being placed in the bucket, right? Well, the thing is, when you vote by mail, those ballots, those early ballots, those are often the first ones that are coming in at the close of the election. And so when we are starting to get those numbers in, those are the ones that are being processed and pushed out. We have a push right now to call our states on election day. We want to see what it looks like, and we want to see where we are sitting at the time that these polling locations close. And so when we have an increase of early voting and vote by mail applications that are able to be processed immediately, we have a better sense of where we sit in the election and where we sit within results at the end of election day. And so I wanted to keep it a little shorter because I know we're running on time. I see that we may have a question in the chat. It says, are we able to track ballots somewhere in every state, or is that state by state? I do believe that it's state by state. So I know that in Ohio, we have a ballot tracking option. That is something that should be right on your Secretary of State's website to find out whether or not there is a tracking mechanism. You can go right to your Secretary of State or give them a call. We at All Voting is Local, we want to understand. Somebody in the chat says we have it in Georgia. Thank you, David. We want to ensure that you all, Indiana has it as well, you all are able to advocate for yourselves, right? You are able to become familiar with your elected officials. They know who you are. You're talking to the Board of Elections. And this is a process that is for the people. And democracy works when we are all involved. The voting process is just one of the processes. It's the door to the electorate, right? And so New Jersey has it as well. Thank you so much. So make sure that you are utilizing these early voting times. If you know some young people, what we are trying and asking people, oftentimes people who are poll workers are older. And because of COVID, we want to ensure that they are safe and they're staying at home. If you know some folks who are younger and able to come out, if you have some congregants that are younger, if you belong to Divine Nines and you guys can utilize your organizations or your sororities or your fraternities and things like that, have everybody vote early, vote by mail, send in that ballot, drop it off at the drop box. And then consider working the polls to ensure that those who have to come in, folks who may be disabled, folks who may not have access to drop boxes that have to come in and vote in person, that they have somebody like you who has been educated on the process, who has gone through the trainings, and who is charged with a divine and prophetic call to serve. And with that, I will thank you, and I hand it back over to our moderator.
Thank you so much, Kayla. So much good information there. So much great information. Great information. Just to touch on a little bit what she was saying, just a note kind of reminded me when you said that when she was a little girl, she saw her parents vote, right? And it brought to mind the scripture, train up a child in the way it should go. And when it is old, they would never part from it. And so that is engagement is so important in these elections. This year in particular, our election engagement cannot start and stop at just voting. Just like Kayla just said, voting is the door to the electoral process, right? And so we have to not only vote, but we must also be holding our elected officials accountable at every level to ensure voter protections so that voters can cast their vote and every vote is counted. We have all heard about the threats of the post office and how, they're going to be delivering slowly and, all of these tactics and things like that to worry us about the mail-in vote and things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to be having a call to action through advocacy, getting involved in the next process beyond voting, calling, making sure that things are okay in our electoral processes, whether it's with the supervisor of election, whether it's with the Secretary of State, whether we need to call and we need to get involved. Our next speaker, we welcome Wendy Fields. She is the Executive Director of the Democracy Initiative, a coalition working to protect our democracy through diminishing the influence of corporate and special interests and strengthening the voter protections so everyone can freely and fully participate in the democratic process. Welcome, Wendy.
Thank you. Thank you, Adwan and Kelsey and folks, my fellow panelists. I'm happy to be here, excited to be here today with you at Faithful Democracy. A couple points. Our coalition is a national coalition of 75 groups that have over 45 million members. Our board members are NAACP. Many of you who know those groups like Sierra Club, Friends of the Earth, CASA. We are sort of broad social justice groups who've come together to work on democracy. And today I want to appreciate what Kayla just said to you, and inspired by Dr. Skinner to say a couple things about this moment. And I know that for each of you all as advocates who took the time this afternoon to come to this, that I want to have a really honest, frank conversation with you about this historic moment. There will be a historic election on November 3rd, and it will not end on November 3rd. It could take up to a couple of weeks to vote, to count the votes, and to make sure that we have a legitimate election. And that's what I'm going to ask of you all for 5 minutes, to just center with me for a minute and think about how important the next few weeks are and the 2 weeks or 3 weeks after that, to make sure we have a legitimate election that every single person who has the right to vote gets to vote, and their vote is counted. This is not about who wins or loses on the party side, because I'm convinced that we will see historic level of voting as we saw in Wisconsin and Georgia and Ohio and Connecticut. We are seeing high levels of participation. So we know vote by mail works. We know 4 states have been doing it. This is nothing new. Here's the historic difference. Black and brown folks have been facing orchestrated suppression, voter suppression, for decades. And what we are now sitting and facing is mass orchestrated voter suppression operating and brought to all of us. And you, as faith leaders, know that what we have is not just faith, but trust. So I'm going to ask you first to trust and think about every election clerk in the country, every election worker in the country who is working tirelessly. They are underappreciated and over-criticized. They work for little and they get your ballot to you, and they are working with high volumes of mail-in ballots, applications. They want to do a good job with less funding. And Odwan talked about, what can you do? We still got to fight for that funding for those people. They are your neighbors. They are your friends. They are the people in your community who you can count on. Number two, what's critical is to make sure that we are also see ourselves as the vessel to voting. That is, trust comes from people you see and know every single day. So what you say to your friends and neighbors, what you remind them to do on voting is so critical. So making that plan and getting that ballot in, because you got to believe me, we have been working on this post office fight I've been working on the post office fight for 2 years. We've been working on vote by mail as a coalition for 2 years. And we started in May, having 20 states have universal vote by mail. We are down to only 2 that do not, Mississippi and South Carolina. So we know advocacy works. And the letter carriers and the postal workers want to make sure you get your ballot counted. They want it to get to you on time, and they want to carry it there. And I am convinced that they will do that. You have to do your part to get that ballot in. So when you get your ballot, you fill it out, sign it, please, use both envelopes, follow directions, and get it in the mail. And we recommend by October 24th. Period, the end. Get it in the mail by October 24th. That's a goal for all of us. Let's just do it. Let's act collectively. The other thing you can do is to make sure that you find out who your clerk is. So I'm going to give you a website, voteathome.org. It's one of our partners. They have a map. They have a little great places you can click to find out what the rules are in your state. And most states, you can track your ballot. The Postal Service has a service that you can track your ballot. So what I'm saying to you is we are operating in an environment where certain people do not want your vote counted. And it is now this moment to operate, not just about the right to participate, but we have to take collective responsibility, just like Black and brown folks for years and poor folks for years have taken responsibility to make sure they can overcome that hurdle to vote. So to us, it's about trust, tracking, understanding whom, know where your clerk's phone number, getting that ballot, get it in by October 24th, and shining a light on what folks are doing. Have your house parties, go down together, right? Make sure we fill them out. Folks are on the ground doing this work every single day, and we're not gonna wait till the last minute. Now, just in case for those of us who know everybody, somebody's gonna wait till the last minute. You know somebody's gonna wait till the last minute. You gotta do these drop boxes, or you gotta know where your clerk office is so you can drop it off. So you don't have to go inside, be safe. You can drop it off at the clerk. You can go down there collectively together and drop it off. But we also must sort of think about where are those drop boxes. If you call the clerk's office, you can go down there and drop it off and drop it outside if you want you to be safe. So for us, remember, this is orchestrated mass suppression. Don't believe everything you hear. You do your part and you have a plan, you go together. My last point to you is November 3rd. You're not gonna know, we're not gonna know the election results. And we're not just focused on Senate, we're not just focused on Congress. We wanna make sure your local officials who are on the ballot get counted, because everything that matters to you in your life is done locally, not necessarily just nationally, right? So we're gonna ask you for patience. Leaders for patience. And for those of you who are too young, we do not want to revisit Gore versus Bush, where they only count one state and a few precincts. We want every vote counted because this is about making change in our lives going forward. So be patient, trust your leaders, trust the websites from the groups that you belong to. Do not pay attention to what that man is saying. Do not. And people at the post, trust your postal service, plus your post office, your postman. Go out there and say hi. Pray for the election worker. They are your unsung heroes. And you volunteer. You've had the invite. If we volunteer and our neighbors see us volunteering and they see us saying hi at the poll, even if you don't work inside, they will feel safe. So to us, this is about our community. No bigger moment for our faith communities and for all of our communities to be together to watch out for the right to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Wendy. So much good information. So great for you to bring those points up. I think one of the things that you touched on that I absolutely love that brings us to our next speaker as well is take the collective responsibility, right? Like we are all in this together. All of our votes count. Everything that we're doing matters, and we have to do it together. Together, we can stand and we can stand up to be counted. Our next speaker, last but not least, by any means, Ms. Tiana Webb. She is the Director of Missions and Programs with the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. Tiana works with faith leaders on the ground who are working to make sure their communities and are represented through both participation and the census, right? And participating with the census as well as voting. We've heard really important information about voter registration, voting by mail, and advocacy for voter protection. We can't let this conversation just stop here. As faith leaders and community members, we now have the responsibility to take our knowledge and share it with our families, friends, neighbors, and congregations. That's that collective responsibility, right? We can do more than just vote. We can spread the word. Welcome, Tiana.
Amen. Thank you so much. And thank you for this great webinar. All the information we heard is great. I know we're pushing up against the 2 o'clock hour for Eastern Standard Time, so I will hurry up through this. Please get your questions into the chat. We would love to respond and have a further dialogue with you all. So yes, I'm from the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. Our headquarters are in Chicago, and we work with 10,000 denominations affiliated with us. We touch around 1 million people of faith around this country, and we're international as well. We have international partners around the world. And so what I want to focus on really, really quick is what faith leaders can do with all of this wonderful information we heard today. So we have a voter registration Sunday that we're doing in partnership with the Black Church Action Fund. We are also encouraging election poll workers, as we heard from Kayla and Wendy, with the American Federation of State, County, Municipal Employees. And that is called Power to the Polls, that campaign. I'll tell you about that website. And we are having our own National Voting Sunday, October 25th. Next slide, please. So what we're hoping to do in September with the Black Church Action Fund is have people go to kind of those one-stop shop websites like MyMuslimVote that we heard earlier. It's a great website. I went on it while we were talking, and I mean, it's very streamlined. And so similar to that, we have blackchurchrocks.com. And so what we're asking people of faith to do, because what we believe is that in the African-American community, African-American faith leaders are the trusted messengers. They can get through all of this information that we heard from Wendy. They can get through all of this, the things that we're hearing, the things that are untrue, and really speak to the heart of the issue. So we're asking pastors to take a Sunday in September to address voting, address voting in their sermon, talk about it in their virtual services, and drive their congregants to some of these one-stop shop websites, right? So ours is the Black Church Rocks. And you can go there, you can check your voter registration, you can request an absentee ballot, you can register to vote. There's a separate website for signing up as a poll worker. And then what we're also asking is, we heard earlier, is for people to text this website then during the service in September to a friend. And this helps with the community accountability, just saying, hey, I use this website, I'm voting here, I know I'm registered, are you? So it's simple, that's what we're asking folks to do in September. Next slide, please. So power to the polls. We are asking folks, as Wendy mentioned, to work at the polling stations. And we know, as Kayla mentioned, that some of the elderly people who usually work there are not going to be able to this year. So we need folks to come out and work. And so this will help secure and protect our voter plan and our votes, and our voter plan and our votes for those in our community. So powertothepolls.org. This is a paid opportunity. They give you PPE, there's training. So this is another way that faith leaders, they can share this during their virtual Sunday services, this information out to their congregants. Next slide. So during October 25th, we heard Wendy say that the goal is to have your ballots, have everything turned in by the 24th. On the 25th, this is the last Sunday in October. We're just encouraging faith leaders to stand up and affirm and amplify this moment in voting, to say that God is a God of justice. God has something to say about this moment, as Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner did when she opened up our webinar today. So we have a toolkit, we're going to have liturgy, we're going to have scripture references. So if you go to our website, you can sign up to receive that information for the last Sunday in October. So we have 8 Sundays left too until Election Day. Yep, next slide, please. And so what we know is that all of these issues that we care so much about are on the ballot. And we know that God has something to say about all of these issues. So we are asking our faith leaders to kind of hone in on this, to get rid of all the different disinformation that we're hearing, all of the confusion, and talk to their families of faith and help people get a voter plan by going to these one-stop shop websites, signing up, and then sharing that information with their community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tiana. We appreciate that information. Thanks so much. Let me just say, with the remaining time that we have, thank you so much to all of our speakers. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the information that you have shared with us, and thank you for your compassion. We really appreciate you all taking the time out to come and speak to the faith leaders and give them information and tools that they need to take back to their communities and their congregants, so that we all can stand up to be counted. Now, with the next few minutes, we're going to go over to Kelsey Herbert. She's going to facilitate the questions and answer portion of this, and then she will also give us a close. Kelsey?
Thanks, Adwan, and thanks, everybody. So we are over time at this time, and I know that there's still a few questions out there, so feel free to put it in the link, and we're going to be happy to get in touch with you via email. If you put your question in there, we'll be sure to find the answer for you, to make sure that you are able to get that. So to wrap this up, we will be sending you an email with this video recording, as well as all the resources that were mentioned, all the different one-stop shops, so much important information here. It doesn't matter where you go, whether you go to MyMuslimVote, whether you go to Samuel Parker Conference. What we need to do is just get the information out there. So I hope you don't feel overwhelmed by the information, but empowered to pick one and share it. And please don't forget to pick up the phone after this call. Pick up the phone tomorrow. Tell your representatives and members of Congress that we need funding for safe and secure elections. This moment is way beyond just a one-time vote. Being a faithful voter means that you are reminding your family and friends to vote. It means that you're calling Congress, telling them that we need emergency funding for USPS and voter protections. It really is our moment. We've been waiting 4 years for this moment. So this is our time, and together as a faith community, we can do this. So more information to come in the follow-up email. Thank you, Adwan, for facilitating this conversation. Thank you to each of the speakers, and thank you to you all for being faithful voters and for being with us today. And so I wish you blessings on the rest of your week, and let's go be faithful voters, and together we can do this. So thank you, everyone, so much.
Thanks, everyone.